This recording is a collection of etudes from either end of the 20th century. So there are pieces by four composers. From the earlier part we have Sergei Lyapunov, a Russian, and Karol Szymanowski, a Polish composer. And then for more recent years there's Nikolai Kapustin, a Russian, and Unsuk Chin from South Korea. So there's a real range of styles and characters here. It's a real exploration of what the piano can do. The Etudes by Chin are really incredible pieces. She writes in an entirely original way, with very unusual and demanding figurations. They're electrifying to perform, although slightly scary, and very absorbing works. They're natural successors to the Etudes by Ligeti. I first came across the Etudes by Chin when I performed them for BBC Total Immersion Weekend at the Barbican a couple of years ago. Before I was asked to perform them, they showed me the scores, and I looked through them. I'd done a lot of contemporary music in the past, and I looked at them and I thought that they looked difficult but feasible, and it was only in the weeks that followed that I realised quite how difficult they were. The scores are deceptive, partly because of the speed that they're written to be played at, but also because the figurations are so unusual. So you can't map patterns from other pieces that you've learnt onto the piece. You have to start from scratch, which was quite a painful and laborious process, but definitely worth it. The pieces are worth the time that you have to put into them. The Etudes by Lyapunov were written between 1895 and 1900, so just before the turn of the 20th century. He wrote 12 in total. The set are called 12 studies, 12 transcendental studies. And you can tell from the title that the influence of Liszt is very strong. In fact, the final piece of the set is called An Elegy to the Memory of Franz Liszt. I've chosen 3 etudes from the centre of the set. The first is called Terek, which is named after a river that flows from Russia through Georgia into the Caspian Sea. Then there's A Summer Night, which is much calmer. And the final one is Tompet, or Storm, which, as you would expect, is very tempestuous and dramatic. The Etudes by Lyapunov are particularly interesting because of the sheer range of expression that you find. So the outer 2 studies that I'll play are very dramatic, very expressive, sort of heart on sleeve. The central piece, the Summer Night, is much more contemplative. It's a very sensuous piece. And Lyapunov uses all kinds of different harmonic shading, which is very original and gives a certain poignancy to the music. I chose to play the Etudes by Shimanovsky as part of this recording, as I had done them a lot in concert over the past few years, and I'd been captivated by their charm and by the wit of the set. There are 12 studies in total, but they're all very short. They last between 30 seconds and 2 minutes each, so each of them is over in the blink of an eye. They were written the year after Debussy's studies in 1916, and they share a similar language to Debussy's, although it's very much Shimanovsky's own. the studies by Shimanovsky, the influence of Debussy and Chopin is very clear, but also, in particular, I think, Scriabin. There are strong contrasts of mood, texture, and tempo between the studies. So in number 9, for example, Shimanovsky experiments with ornamentation, and you have to sort of hop around the keyboard in a very fanciful way. I was introduced to Kapustin's Etudes while I was a student at the Guildhall School of Music and Drama in London. I didn't have an opportunity to play them at the time, but I thought they were fantastic, and I filed them away for future use. I knew that I had to use them. Kapustin himself was born in 1937 in the Ukraine and studied in Moscow, where he now lives. His music wasn't very well known in the West until around the millennium, when pianists like Stephen Osborne and Marc-André Hamelin started to record and perform his works. Kapustin uses a really intriguing fusion of jazz and classical music. So he takes the forms and the structures of classical music and he mixes them with the language of jazz, with the harmonies and the colour, which gives the pieces a great exuberance and warmth. People often say that they can hear the influence of Oscar Peterson and Art Tatum in his music, and for Kapustin, Oscar Peterson was particularly important. The 5 studies in different intervals which I've recorded for this disc are particularly characteristic of Kapustin in that they're very strictly constructed. So each of the studies is based on an individual interval. For example, the 3rd study is based on the interval of a 6th. So if you hear the first melody, he repeats that melody at the same time but a 6th below the top line. So if you count down 6 from the first note, you then get this. So throughout the study, you can hear the melodies reflected, as it were, just beneath it, and it gives a very specific physical sensation as a pianist. The first study is particularly intriguing in that he uses a minor second, and a minor second sounds like this, which is a pretty ghastly sound, but he manages to create something really incredible with this. For me, what's particularly exciting about the disc as a whole is the sheer variety of the technical challenges that I have to address and of expression that you find in the music. The concept of an etude, which is designed to develop the technical facility of a pianist, might seem to be quite restrictive, but it actually inspires these composers to greater heights of ingenuity and imagination. They really push you to the limit of what you can do, both physically and emotionally. And I think that the disc as a whole presents a synopsis of the developments, the tremendous developments that have taken place in writing for the piano over the past century.